Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first Digital FP&A Board for year 2021. It's our Digital UK and Ireland FP&A Board. And the subject today is moving from traditional management accounting to extended planning and analysis, what it is and what does it mean for us and how we can move there. I'm really happy to welcome you at this digital board. I'm happy to welcome our FP&A board members from London. I know that you are there, and also fantastic that we can see other UK professionals to join us, and also Irish professionals as well. But it's amazing. It's a global meeting as well, because we have representatives of 35 countries today and more than 400 registrations. Let me very quickly remind you about the agenda. So what is extended FP&A? What does it mean? Next generation of FP&A operating model and how the end of corporate performance management and beginning of extended P&A is happening right now. Then, of course, about the mindset shift and integrating our planning processes. And also, at the end, how FP&A professionals can get ready for this incredible shift. This is happening right now. Conclusions, recommendations, Q&A session, and so on and so forth. A very quick reminder about London FP&A board. The previous meetings that we had, always had them face-to-face. We had more than 25 meetings over the last 4 or 5 years, just to demonstrate to you that we are looking at different latest trends and developments in modern FP&A. And of course, the last 3 meetings, they're in digital format, because we can only travel digitally at the moment. And this is a great timing to welcome our international panel. And I would like to invite our panelists to switch on your cameras and to switch on your microphones. And I will start quick introductions. So, international panel, we have 2 panelists from Canada, from North America, one from Canada, one from the US, and of course, UK as well. So the first panelist is Neely Esaides, who is Senior Research Director at the Hackett Group. We know Neil, I know Neely for many years, and Neely traveled to London to some of our previous meetings. Neely is very well known in the area of corporate performance management. She's a professional writer, researcher, and the thought leader in this area. So today, Neely is going to talk about the new operating model for planning and analysis. Neely, you're welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And Neely joined us from the west coast of the US. The next member of our panel is David Williams. David is Vice President at SAP. We had an opportunity to meet each other at those FP&A boards that we held in North America, face-to-face meetings. David is very passionate about the subject of analytics, and especially he's researching the subject of how corporate performance management is replaced by modern financial planning and analysis methods, by XP&A. David, you're welcome, and David joined us from Canada. David, so happy to see you.
Hey everyone. Hi Larissa, hi everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. The next panelist is from the UK, Karen Haynes, who's Divisional Finance Director at Oxford University Press. Karen joined us from the UK, and Karen has a wealth of experience in FP&A, and she's very passionate about particular subject that is about integration, and she implemented some integration projects throughout her career, and she will share with us her experience today. Karen, so happy to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. And our last panelist is Ash Sharma. Again, Ash, we know each other for more than 5 years. Ash presented at some of our FP&A boards and FP&A circles, and Ash is finance director at Walgreens Boots Alliance, a lot of experience in FP&A, but special interest is about team development. So how we can move people to the next level and how we can develop those soft skills that are so important for FP&A people. Ash, welcome, and we are happy to have you here as a panelist.
Hi everyone, really great to be here and share my views.
Fantastic. So Ash joined us from the UK as well. So this is our panel. A very quick introduction of my experience. I'm founder and CEO at FP&A Trends Group and International FP&A Board, CIMA qualified accountant. A lot of experience in FP&A from practical point of view, but in the last 5 years, I'm developing FP&A Trends Group and International FP&A Board. So it's okay for panelists to switch off the cameras for me to do some introductory slides. Just to remind you that with our project, we travel to 27 cities, 16 countries, 4 continents. Those are the cities, but obviously it's all started from London. And at the moment, it's such a fantastic opportunity for us to have these digital events. But FP&A Trends Group, we also do research, advisory. We started just recently some consulting projects as well on best practice FP&A. And of course, a lot of educational events and FP&A Trends webinar and FP&A Board. This is the example of those. Very briefly to remind you about our today's webinar, our today's digital FP&A Board. So we have 90 minutes. We will have 4 polling questions. Please be ready to vote when we launch polling questions. We will have interactive Q&A session, and also it would be wonderful if we connect, if we are not connected yet after this meeting. So you're welcome to connect with speakers, with myself as well through LinkedIn. Just indicate this webinar as the subject. And of course, presentations are available in handouts right now. You can download this. If you can watch this online. And of course, the recording will be sent to you within 2 days, so you will be able to listen this again. And please take part at the brief survey after the session. It's so important for us to know how we can improve. And before we start with our session, thank you so much to our technology partner, SAP, one of the world's leading provider of modern FP&A solutions. Thank you so much, making this accessible, easy, and free to all our participants. Thank you for supporting us globally. And I would like, just before we start a presentation from our panelists, just a quick introduction about the subject of extended planning and analysis. So XP&A, what it is, it stands for Extended Planning and Analysis. But is it really something new? This is the question that we ask. At least for the last 5 to 10 years, I observed this from my own practical experience, but also from working on FP&A boards, that definitely FP&A already going beyond just finance and so well placed in order to share the knowledge and share the experience and analytics with the whole organization. So there are many other names for extended FP&A, but the term is relatively new and quite popular now. So it came from Gartner. I think it was research that was issued in February last year. But other names, it's about, we were calling this integrated FP&A, digitized FP&A, next generation FP&A. And of course, there are some key features of this process. And we were talking about these best-in-class FP&A processes and solutions. And this is about agility. It's about planning and forecasting on demand. It's about analytical transformation, and of course, about digitized, supported by technology, FP&A business partnering, and many others. But what we will do today, so we have limited time, but we have fantastic subjects to cover. We will look at the subject of XP&A from these 4 facets. FP&A operating model, it would be the first one. Then evolution of CPM to extended planning and analysis. The mindset shift to integration, and of course, how to get ready for FP&A professionals for this move, how we can adjust. So we are ready to look at the first facet of extended planning and analysis. It's about modern FP&A operating model. Neely, the stage is yours. So Neely Isaidas, a Senior Research Director at the Hackett Group, and the subject of next generation FP&A operating model. Neely, you're welcome. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Larissa, and thanks everyone for joining us morning, afternoon, night, since as Larissa was saying, this is a global digital event, which is a great thing, allowing everybody to participate. I am the Senior Director for Finance and EPM at Hackett's Finance Advisory Group. I don't know how much you're familiar with Hackett. It's a consulting, full-scale consultancy, but really what I'm going to focus on, where I'm going to anchor my comments, is our experience, my experience over years with FP&A. As Larissa was saying, she and I met probably 10 years ago, a long time ago, we've known each other. My experience with FP&A, I've been in this field for over 25 years. Our client experience, and most importantly, we're known very much for our data and empirical research. And I will share some of that data with you, some of the recent data to support the points I'm going to make with regard to how FP&A is evolving into what we call next generation or next gen FP&A. So let's move to the next slide. So there are a lot of forces driving the evolution or the transition to next generation FP&A. And you can see those on the slide. But I want to start by saying that this transition, this evolution is no longer a matter of choice. It is an imperative. And that's going to be a challenge for some organizations who are still in an accounting sort of accrual versus forecast backward looking mindset. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to involve a lot of upskilling, technology adoption, and my distinguished co-panelists are going to speak more to that. But it's also very exciting. And I think we should focus on that because the FP&A team, the FP&A organization, its role has been greatly elevated by the disruption we experienced in 2020 and still experience today. More than ever, really, business leaders, senior management, they need the insight, the data-driven contributions, the performance evaluation, and looking forward that FP&A can provide so they can chart a course forward. And so that, I think, to me, just speaks to it's going to be an ongoing position that we're all going to be in. And that's the exciting part. And hopefully you're working on it. We've seen in our client base, as Larissa was saying, there are some companies that are already there. On the other hand, we saw companies that had a really hard time dealing with the disruption caused by the outbreak of the coronavirus. So you have, different levels of maturity, and we're talking about moving up that maturity curve. So the coronavirus outbreak was really a wake-up call for a lot of companies and for FP&A organizations. The disruption level, the speed of change, they challenged several companies or many companies depending on size and maturity level. And there's no expectation really that that's going to change anytime soon. We ran our annual key issue study, which we do every year, and it's really targeted at identifying the top priorities for finance and some of the initiatives on the docket for finance and FP&A organizations. And what we found when we looked across G&A functions is that 46% of executives do not expect any return to some kind of normalcy before the second half of this year, and 25% really don't expect any of that to happen, any stabilization, until sometime in 2022. So the reality is we're going to continue to live within an environment of great uncertainty and volatility, again, raising the profile of FP&A within the organization. I think one of the things we need to think about is that research point I want to share with you is that the number one disruptor to business operations as a result of the pandemic has been the ability to keep up with the speed of change. And number two was rising demand from stakeholders, from FP&A, business partners, and management for more information, faster, and more forward-looking information. So having to address these issues is a paramount concern for all FP&A organizations, and something that will be a critical feature of this next generation FP&A operating model, which I'll talk to in a minute. It's going to demand a lot of upskilling, as I said, and it's going to also affect the digital landscape that is available to EPM professionals. There's a lot of it. There's a rich functionality landscape out there. There's a lot more we can do. And David will speak more to that from his perspective. We see that some of today's FP&A organizations are just not up for this challenge, and that's very concerning. Because when we looked at our key issue results, six of the main objectives for this year involved some kind of role for FP&A, specifically becoming a better business advisor or improving analytics. And when we asked professionals whether or not they are able to deliver on business needs in this area, their response versus the priority level was disappointing. So again, it's an imperative that things will change as we move forward. Let's move on to the next slide. So to understand the evolving role of FP&A, we must kind of step back for a minute and look at what we think is the operating model for the future finance organization. And FP&A is going to play a significant role in some of these areas. We can talk about, different kinds of vocabulary for what we're using, but FP&A shows up and will be primarily in business enablement leaders, either as an embedded resource, or often as an embedded resource, or as a resource within a COE that's supporting particular business function. So we need to, the other area where we see FP&A playing an important role is in becoming a transformation driver for the business, in analyzing performance, look at the processes, and suggesting areas of transformation. So it's going to be a transformation leader in the organization, and that transformation feature is very unique to this new model. And to make that happen, to free up time for professionals to focus on these value-adding activities, we see some of the more transactional, mundane, repetitive mostly activities, like some reporting, moving into global business services organizations or digital operations, so that we see more time being dedicated to things like business partnership and transformation execution. I think, of course, next slide, please. Sorry. So the big question, of course, and I'm sure that's on everyone's mind, is what do you need to do to get to this new level, FP&A 2.0, extended, whatever we call it. As Larissa said, it comes in all kinds of names. And I think the important thing to consider is there's not a single silver bullet. There isn't a simple solution to getting there. It's going to have to involve every facet of what we think of as the FP&A operating model, or its ability service delivery model. It's got 6 components, but the ones most important to think about in this area right now is the improvement of analytics and modeling. That's a key area, and also data management. So FP&A needs to think about how that's going to be looking, that's going to look like in the future. The other area where we see changes to the service delivery model is in organization and governance. In organization, COEs, centers of excellence, or again, decision support centers of excellence, EPM centers of excellence, again, they come in all kinds of names, but really what it means is some kind of centralization of talent to augment and amplify scarce resources, because most companies in finance and FP&A cannot hire multiple data scientists, statistical gurus, whatever you want to call them. So you have that group centered in a COE to handle complicated questions coming in from the business. At the same time, pushing more of the question and answer, the inquiry process, directly into the hands of your business partners through self-service tools. And that allows them to ask pressing business questions and get quick answers so they can move forward with their plans, instead of sending a question to a central location and getting in a queue that may or may not be fast enough to answer their questions. So really what the COE becomes is an expertise center. Some of the reporting, as I said, moves to a global business services organization. Some of the first line insight generation moves into the business. And a lot of the high-end advanced analytics enabled by new tools sits within the COE, that's serving not just finance, but serving the entire enterprise, which is kind of the change in the operating model. So finance analytics, FP&A analytics, decision support centers will no longer only provide services to the people in the finance organization worldwide, or regionally, however they're set up, but really support other functions, all the businesses in the entire enterprise, and become an enterprise capability center, really a much more powerful and a much more important role. So let's move to the next slide. So I think I skipped a slide, but hopefully
no, this is the last one, Nili, from your side.
Yes,
And this is the timing. This is the timing now for the commentaries, if you don't mind.
Yes,
so
please.
I would like to invite all our panelists to switch on the cameras and to comment. David, you are the first. So what would be your quick 30 seconds commentary on Nili's insights?
Well, my camera was off, but I was nodding my head as Nili was going through. We could spend I could spend 30 minutes commenting. I think Nili highlighted a couple of key things. Agility is paramount now, more than ever. I'll touch on that in a minute. And the other thing about the modern technologies. So things are much different in the past in terms of what the capabilities are in the technologies. For example, combining planning and analytics together. So great stuff, Nili.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, David. Kevin, what would be your subject matter on these particular insights?
Well, firstly, I think that Nili and I have got quite a lot to talk about, actually, because a lot of what she discussed is things that I've sort of lived in some of my experiences. But I mean, COEs can be so powerful, and their expertise and their talents around data and analysis is extremely important. But agility is still the challenge. I think you can plan big data project analysis, but the agility to respond to urgent customer or market circumstances with the analysis is something that, certainly in organizations I've worked in, it has been work in progress.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Ash, what would be your insights after this presentation?
I think Nili laid out the agenda for change really, really well. Now, I really like the idea of this next generation FP&A being the analytical engine across the whole organization and driving the strategic agenda. Now, this has been the goal of FP&A right from the start. And all these seismic changes that we've experienced, they present a perfect burning platform now. And we have the enabling technologies to be able to take it forward. So, yeah, fantastic.
Thank you so much, Ash. Neely, once again, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights with us. And now it's a good timing to ask our participants to answer the questions. What is happening in your world? What are the biggest skill gaps you have between traditional FP&A, traditional management accounting, and modern FP&A? I'm launching the polling question right now. And I would like to ask you to vote and to choose one sentence, one description that is the best fit for you, for your current organization. So what is the biggest skill gap between traditional management accounting and modern FP&A? Analytics and modeling, technology and data savviness, communication and storytelling skills, critical thinking, or business acumen. Please, can you continue to vote? But please, can you continue to choose the one that is the best description for your situation, for your experience, for your company? I can see that more than 50% of you voted. Just a few seconds, and I'm closing the poll, and I'm sharing the results with everyone. So those are the results. You can see them right now. So analytics and modeling, 26% of you. Technology and data savviness, 33% of you. Communication and storytelling, 15. Critical thinking, 9. And business acumen, 17. Neely, would you like to comment on this? What would be your points? Are you surprised? Is it something that you experience around the globe with this?
Yes, I think I'm not surprised. I think we see a lot of gaps in the technology savviness and analytics, which came up as the first two. I think it's really important, and I think Ash will talk to that, not to forget the communication and storytelling skills, because no matter how savvy is your analysis and your modeling, if you can't share it effectively with the business, then you're not going to influence decisions.
Thank you so much, Neely. Absolutely. Interesting results, very even at some of the areas, but interesting to see what people experience right now. I'm hiding the results, and this is a good timing for us to look at the second facet of extended planning and analysis. And David is here to share with us his thinking, his experience on end of CPM, and beginning of extended planning and analysis. David, you're welcome. The microphone and stage is yours.
Thanks, Larissa. So just a brief introduction again. So as Larissa mentioned, I'm with SAP. We're the largest provider of enterprise application software. And also, according to IDC, we're the market share leader for enterprise performance management, or EPM, applications. And that's what I'm going to talk about here for the next few minutes. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada. I've spent the last 20 years covering the analytics, BI, and EPM/planning software spaces. So we can go to the next slide. So enterprise performance management, it's also known as corporate performance management, or CPM, or business performance management, or BPM, or financial performance management, or FPM. So different software vendors, different analysts, they're going to use different technology, or different terms, sorry. For example, CPM was coined by Gartner 20 years ago, but they all refer to the same thing. It was this ideal of setting our strategy at a high level, at the top level, and then we cascade that all down through the organization so everyone's in alignment. Now, the reality is that it never happened, right? It was just too monolithic, not agile enough, and it never really got beyond finance. Because what tended to happen is that the use cases in EPM or CPM, they centered around two key areas. They centered around planning, and they centered around financial consolidation and close. And for example, I've never heard a customer in all the years I've been covering the EPM space say, our CPM is broken. We need better CPM, right? It was always, we're drowning in spreadsheets. We need a more agile way to plan. We need to stop planning in silos. We need a faster, more accurate financial close. We need to spend less time running around and grabbing data and rolling up spreadsheets, and more time on analysis and better supporting the business. The other thing that we're seeing, and this has happened very recently, is that we're seeing customers really want to get tighter integration between their financial consolidation systems and their core financials so that they can have a faster, more accurate close. And then on the planning side, the same thing. We're seeing customers that want that integration between plan and actuals, so they have one version of the truth and they can get real-time insight into their systems of record. And Larissa, in the recent FP&A trend survey that you guys ran, this came out. It was apparent 87% of respondents believe that integrating their planning app in real time with their ERP would allow them to make faster decisions. So I wrote about this topic, really about the end of EPM and CPM as we know it, in this transition into what we're calling extended planning and analysis in a blog back in 2019. That's what that graphic is on the right. Let's go on to the next slide. So Larissa already introduced extended planning and analysis. This term, yes, it was coined by Gartner. Extended planning and analysis, again, we saw that most EPM use cases, they really centered around planning. Now, while finance, and in particular FP&A, is the most associated with planning in an organization, the reality is that every single line of business and everyone plans to some capacity. Marketing plans programs, sales plans, sales targets and quota and compensation. HR does strategic workforce planning. Supply chain does sales and operation planning. And XP&A is really about bringing together your strategic, your financial, and your operational plans so everyone's in alignment and you achieve better business outcomes. And that may seem familiar because really XP&A is what we are trying to achieve with CPM, okay? But it's not like CPM in that it's much more agile, it's much more bottoms up driven, and not so monolithic. So that's what extended planning and analysis is really striving to achieve. It's not brand new, but you're now seeing organizations that need to do this more than ever. Now, not to create or throw another acronym in here again, you may hear from some analysts and software vendors refer to what we're calling XP&A as integrated business planning, or IBP. Now, integrated business planning, it really originated out of the realm of SNOP, but it was striving to do the same thing, to bring the sales and operations plan more tightly integrated in with the financial plan. And Karen's going to talk more about this in a minute. Well, let's go into the next slide. So why all the talk right now about XP&A? And one thing is, if you look at this quote at the bottom of the slide from E.O. Wilson, it talks about drowning information and starving for wisdom. This quote is 20 years old. It's not new, but it's definitely relevant. In fact, it's more relevant than it's ever been before, because we have more volume of data than ever before. We also have more types of data that we want to leverage to drive data-driven decision-making. Because data-driven decision-making, quite frankly, is at the heart of digital transformation. And digital transformation projects really started to spike with COVID-19, because what it exposed is that the old way of doing things just was not going to cut it anymore. So if there's one silver lining, COVID has been terrible, but if there's one silver lining in it, it's actually forced. There was a forcing function to get digital transformations, especially move to cloud-based systems, to get those pushed through. Because if you look at airlines, you look at the retail industry, had to shift virtually overnight to 100% online fulfillment model. And you look at healthcare organizations, which had incredibly rising number of patients and need to deal with keeping up with stock of PPE equipment. So this is what's created the need more than ever for agile planning. So we've got that need for agile planning. We need to not only plan faster, we need to act faster, right? So we need to sense, respond, simulate, and act quickly. There's a need for speed, because plans, quite frankly, without action don't go anywhere. So these are the things that are fueling the need more for extended planning and analysis. But the other thing is that we now have the technology. Nili highlighted this earlier. She talked about modern technology. She talked about how important analytics are as well. Because we now, just to tee this up, some of you may remember the 1970s show, The $6 Million Man, and there was a spin-off, The Bionic Woman. Now, in the intro to that TV show, it went, we have the technology, we have the capability to create the world's first bionic man, better than he was before, better, stronger, faster. And we now have the technology, we have the capability to provide unified, comprehensive planning platforms to create and connect all plans across the organization, and also have them tightly integrated into your systems of record. So you have that one version of truth, you can get the real-time insights. But it doesn't stop there, because unlike in the past, where you had a planning tool and then you'd have a separate BI or reporting tool and then a separate predictive analytics product, modern comprehensive planning platforms have advanced analytics embedded within. So you have everything that you need to plan and analyze in one place. So we can move on to the next slide. Let's just take a look here at an example of someone who's doing this. So Kosher, they're a global provider of cleaning technology. If you have a power washer at home, there's a very good chance that Kosher has manufactured that. But global organization, numbers, many different subsidiaries, many different planners. Now, like many organizations, they were stuck in still a spreadsheet-driven planning processes that were siloed across the organization. So getting the information that they needed out of different parts of the business was labor-intensive. Trying to connect all the different data sources that they needed caused challenges, and quite frankly, it created accuracy issues. So they embarked on a goal to align their strategic plan with a financial plan, and then bring those operational plans in alignment so that they had that transparency across the organizations and could make better data-driven decisions. So now they have clear and consistent data and processes, each line of business, and set their operational targets and help them achieve their strategic goals. And the other thing is that this helps them adapt more quickly to fluctuations in demand. So where do you get started? Okay, so one way to start is to integrate your financial plan with your sales and operations plan. And this, again, was really the gist of integrated business planning. And Karen's going to talk about this more in a minute. So I'll invite the panel now to comment.
David, thank you so much for your interesting presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I would like to invite all our panelists to switch on the cameras and microphones. And at first, I would like to ask Karen to comment on this presentation and to give your key takeaways.
Great. Yes. So, I mean, really interesting. And I've worked on, a number of projects like this. And I suppose my comment is, in order to harness the power of the sophistication of the planning systems, as you say, we've got the technology. What I've observed in a number of companies is that the organizational muscle around data integrity, data ownership, rigor, and governance has been a real challenge. So the technology is there, but there's still a change curve required to really harness the data, organize it, align it, cleanse it, to really unlock that power. So hints and tips on how to make that work would be brilliant, but it's definitely a journey. I think the journey to get there around data to really continue to leverage the technology is something absolutely imperative, but it's a challenging task.
Thank you, Karen. Ash, what would be your commentaries?
Very simply, whatever we call it, XP&A, integrated planning, or CPM 2.0, see, being agile and integrated is probably a fundamental requirement now. And the key challenges I've seen in my experience comes more in how it gets implemented. Karen mentioned about data integrity. That's just one part of it. I mean, there is a whole host of things if we are talking about integrating across the whole organization. That throws up a lot of challenges. And to me, that's where all of the focus needs to be to unlock the value of integrated planning or XP&A.
Thank you, Ash. And Neely, what would be your insights after this presentation?
I really like that $6 billion $6 million, I think, dollar man, because I think the bionic man is a really good analogy. What I think what Dave was getting at, which I think I totally agree with, it's that it's a combination of process changes and technology. Technology by itself is not going to change things. And I wanted to share a couple of data points that are relevant to this. We just ran an EPM in the cloud study end of last year. So I think that kind of gives us fresh data. And we found that the use of EPM cloud solutions almost doubled since 2016. So there's a great push for that for the various reasons that David has mentioned. We also see a strong push on improving analytics. #1 initiative on finance department's list of to-dos for this year. And it's represented as well by very aggressive growth levels for advanced analytics, year over year, 24%. So I think the data supports Dave's point very well.
It's a great example. Thank you so much. And thank you, David, once again. And thank you, panelists, for your wonderful commentaries. And now this is the time to ask our participants what is happening in your FP&A or XP&A world. So I'm launching the next polling question, and if you can start voting as soon as you see this on your screen. So please choose one of those options that is the best description for your process. Has the organization adopted a cross-functional XP&A strategy yet? Yes, my organization has already made a move in that direction. We updated FP&A structure and tools to move in that direction. My organization may adopt in a few years, or we don't believe that FP&A needs a cross-functional strategy. So please, can you continue to vote? More than 50% of you voted, just a few seconds for you to take this opportunity to vote and to share your experience. And I'm closing the poll right now, and I'm going to share the results, very interesting results. And actually, we already did similar survey at different webinars, and interesting to see that we don't believe that FP&A needs a cross-functional strategy, only 1%. Previously, it was up to 5%. And it's amazing to see that 21% of you already started this journey. 42% already updated structure and tools, and 36% of you will start this journey in a few years. I would like to ask David to comment on this. So, David, what would be your key
First of all, I'm glad there's only 1% on the bottom one. I think there's definitely, as we articulated, there's a need to have FP&A and a cross-functional strategy to align the business. And I'm really happy to see that many companies have the structures and tools in place already to move in that direction. So very happy to see that.
It's an amazing result. I would say that even at the end of last year, the figures were different. So definitely the transformation is accelerating. Thank you for your commentary, David. I'm hiding the results. And let us go to the next presentation and to the next facet. So it's all about the mindset shift, but the mindset shift to the subject of integration, integrating all the levels of our planning and analytics process. And here in particular, we will look at the case study of integrating SNOP and FP&A. Kevin, you're welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. So thanks everyone. It's lovely to be here, and it's brilliant to see so many people interested in the conversation today. My name is Karen Haynes. I'm the Divisional Finance Director at Oxford University Press, but my background is a finance director role in a number of industries. So steel industry, the petroleum industry. I've worked in food for a number of years, in herbs and spices, and also a drinks company called Diageo. So I suppose a variety of roles, both in FP&A, in supply finance, as well as commercial finance. So I'm very passionate about the topic of FP&A because it's been a real linchpin in the development of my own career. So I'm here to talk about the mindset shift of FP&A and then how business processes such as sales and operations planning can offer a recipe to move out of the traditional FP&A and into extended planning and analysis. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Whilst the roles of AI and cloud technology are strategically imperative and key enablers, many organisations are living extended planning and analysis despite not yet having brilliant IT systems. In my experience, the secret to bridging the strategy execution gap of extended planning and analysis is really mindset backed by process and action. So key levers to set the FP&A team up for success to create the mindset include finance leaders role modelling and empowering their teams with objective growth mindset, clarifying roles across traditional finance, FP&A and business partnering. The FP&A team being genuinely curious to understand the business, offering objective and constructive challenge, but with the reputation as a trusted business partner. And finally, action. It must be action focused to lead on wider business strategies and problem solving, enabling the business to be more successful. With these ingredients, FP&A are well placed to leverage three things that I call and see as superpowers. So the first superpower, of course, is our technical skill in finance, as well as the structure of how we work, because some people find accounting and structure boring. It's absolutely a skill and a competitive advantage for finance. The second superpower is access to breadth of information. In our FP&A roles, our access to information gives us insight into the impact of every decision and action that everyone in an organisation makes. The actuals and the forecast information show the brilliant, the good, the bad and the ugly, and the numbers show the truth of performance. The third superpower is exposure to the whole organisation, and therefore a unique perspective on understanding of organisational bias. And when I say organisational bias, I mean that the balance of functional share of voice in most organisations, or many, can be uneven, and this actually prohibits high performance for the wider organisation. And an example of that is a brand-led company is very biased to the brand, and hence the innovation, sales and marketing teams, and they have a very high share of voice. And of course, the brand is the value of the company, so this makes complete sense. But the flip side is that supply or other functions are seen as back office and so don't have as big a share of voice. And this can limit performance if consumer and customer promises can't be delivered as the day-to-day execution is chaotic. Another example is in technology-led companies, as they may be biased too heavily to the techno gurus, as innovation is seen as the priority, and of course it is the priority. But this might mean that opportunities to leverage or grow the life cycle of existing products is deprioritised and hence value is lost. So in both of these examples, share of voice and decision making can lead to suboptimal performance. One business process provides a brilliant framework for FP&A to leverage these superpowers and balance cross-functional decision-making is the sales and operations planning process. In SNOP, the focus on holistic data and analytics cut through the organisational bias and the functional storytelling, and this enables balanced decision-making. If we move to the next slide, please. For those not familiar with sales and operations planning, it's a process which marries innovation and demand and supply planning with financial planning over a 1 to 36 month time horizon. And the aim is to cash up sales and operations plan and understand the financial implications and therefore understand the gap to the strategy and the targets and act to get back on track. I know that this slide is quite a busy one, but it shows how SNOP offers an ideal playground for FP&A, as each of these road signs is an extended planning and analysis opportunity. So let's focus on some of the road signs. Under the innovation banner, let's look at product strategy, consumer analysis, and price planning. In my role at Diageo, my commercial FP&A team assessed innovation pipelines, net revenue management, competitor price ladders, pack formats, and therefore were able to recommend scenarios to the sales and marketing teams to deliver the brand strategy and the quality of market share gain. Focusing on the supply banner, for the road signs, faster decision-making, operational plans, and cost reduction. In my McCormick roles and my Diageo supply finance roles, my supply FP&A teams were able to recommend how to balance shift planning, quality, safety, manufacturing line efficiency, waste and labour cost to decide which shift pattern on which production line produce the best quality product at the lowest cost. And this meant correlating financial performance with manufacturing operational performance to develop and lead cost reduction programs to improve margins. So in all of these examples, my teams had to step out of their traditional finance role and their comfort zones, and they had to be tenacious, curious, challenging, and sometimes unpopular in order to drive the best out of the performance for the company. Next slide, please. An example where SNOP added value is one where my company wanted to expand into a new region, build a new manufacturing site in order to partner with a global fast food customer who was also looking to grow in that region. And this project was a pure extended planning and analysis one because for finance, it included things like strategic blue sky planning and investment business cases and approvals. It included project management and a strong SNOP cadence that focused on a 24-month program to ensure that the business case was delivered. And the activities that leaned into extended planning and analysis included decisions and recommendations to use a joint venture or a fully owned legal entity, the validation of sales and marketing strategy for the emerging market, including consumer insight and market share opportunities, commercial business partnering to decide on price points and margin of new packaging and product formulations, and business partnering for the R&D and supply teams to scope the technical quality and engineering capital investment alternatives to deliver customer-owned formulation specifications. So the combination of FP&A leadership and the SNOP business routine really added incredible value to make this project successful. And whilst SNOP is often applied to manufacturing and supply environments, it's an equally valid process for intellectual property and service industries, as it does focus on the commercialization of concepts in order to deliver the corporate imperative. So it's not just a physical product process, it can be applied in more than those industries. Next slide, please. So in summary, extended planning and analysis is significantly more than the traditional accounting. It is a mindset shift, and it drives much greater impact if we use our technical skill and our FP&A superpowers to best advantage. So if your organisation is still on the journey and is not there yet, my suggestions are FP&A need to move from reporting the numbers to leading and enabling whole organisation to make best decisions. FP&A must remain objective. We must support and challenge all functions to cut through the organisational bias and act as one in order to deliver the mission. And FP&A need to encourage process, whether this is integrated business planning, sales and operations planning, or another, because the rigour and discipline of routine processes combined with accurate data and timely decision making will always pay dividends. And with these ingredients, and ideally the technology that David's discussed today in terms of the planning technology that is available and will absolutely be the bionic man or woman of the future, your team are well placed to become extended planning and analysis practitioners. So thank you. I'd now like to invite Nili, David and Ash in for their comments.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you for your wonderful presentation and for practical examples as well. It's time to give some additional information to discuss it. Ash, what would be your commentaries on this presentation?
Well, to me, SNOP is fundamentally a cross-functional process. And the challenge always is to enable and sustain that cross-functional collaboration. And there are important elements within that, whether it's process design, systems, data provision, all of that need to be done, but they need to be underpinned with more softer enablers such as reward and recognition, empowerment, and other cultural factors. That's what I've seen in my experience.
Excellent, thank you, Ash. David, what would be your commentaries?
Yeah, I like how Karen talked about the FP&A function being at the center of driving extended planning and analysis. So you can think of them like the center midfielder in football, or the quarterback in American football, or even your point guard in basketball. So FP&A they're key to helping drive this extended planning analysis process throughout the organization.
Thank you, David. And Nili, your commentaries, please.
So I agree with David. The way we think about that and reaching outside of finance or integrated business planning, the reality is at any given time, there are all kinds of planning events happening, different parts of the organization. And ideally, you would think that synchronizing them would be the way to go, but in fact, that's not, because each planning event is connected to a particular planning horizon, to the business, to the projects that they're working on. So I think FP&A, to David's point, we think of them as the kind of the orchestrators of this information supply chain. So they need to be collecting and updating and directing and shepherding other parts of the organization so that everybody has the latest plan information when they get to their own planning event.
Thank you so much, Nili. Thank you, panelists, for your great commentaries, and thank you, Karen, for your excellent presentation. Again, this is the timing to check what is happening in the world of our participants. We would like to understand what is the most effective process for unlocking your XP&A opportunity in your organization. Let me launch the polling question. And please, can you vote? Can you start voting and choosing the best description for you, for your experience, for your organization? So what is the most effective process for unlocking XP&A opportunity in your organization? Is it flexible FP&A system? Is it effective FP&A business partnering model? Is it integrated FP&A process? Or is it predictive prescriptive analytics, maybe even AI ML? Please continue to vote. Almost half of you already voted. Just a few seconds. Please take this opportunity to share your experience with us. It's very, very valuable, very, very important. So more than 60% of you voted, and I'm closing the poll, and I'm sharing the results with everyone. So what do we have here? Interesting. So 43% of you think that FP&A business partnering model is the one, the most important for XP&A. 13% of you think about flexible FP&A systems, 32% about integrated FP&A process, and only 11% about predictive prescriptive analytics and other methods. Karen, what would be your commentary on this?
I think, I mean, the trend here, I think, is familiar, not because, predictive and prescriptive analytics is not the priority. I think it's about us, the people, organizations catching up with the speed of development of that technology. So, I mean, business partnering is a lot of what I've described in my presentation, and I suppose that's where I've found best success in FP&A, and one that I'm very passionate about. And I'm also very passionate about process. So I'm really pleased to see those two as ranking quite high. So I think it's about where we are in the moment and our ability, and organizations, depending on their size, sort of catching up with that technological progress. And maybe if we did this in another 12 months, 3 years, the answer might be quite different because everyone's adjusted to that new technological environment.
Thank you so much, Karen. We can see that more than 75% of you are really thinking about this soft skill, effective FP&A business partnering, but also about integrating FP&A process. So this is a good timing for our final session about soft skills. I'm hiding the results, and we are going to the fourth and last session, and it's all about how we should get ready for this transition from a FP&A professional point of view. Ash, the stage is yours.
Hi all, great to be sharing my views and experiences with you all. I'm Ash Sharma. I'm Finance Director of Special Projects at Walgreens Boots Alliance. I've spent most of my 24 years in finance within FP&A, building frameworks, enhancing capabilities, and most importantly, developing people. And I'm going to talk about you, the professionals. So if you can move on to the next slide. You've already heard in the previous sessions the case for change, why and how. Now, the pace of change has been relentless, and no doubt all of this has had and will continue to have an impact on how finance organizations and FP&A in particular deal with it. Now, this shows what I would call the basic elements, what makes up an FP&A function as we know it. Tools and techniques, technology, data, you all know about this. And the last element, people, who bring it all together, who drive it all. Now, has that kept pace? Now, we as FP&A leaders are engaged in identifying and developing these key resources. But then what does this FP&A person really look like? What are the fundamental traits of this person? What are the more elusive traits? What sets a good FP&A professional apart from a glorified human calculator? You can move on to the next slide, please. Now, taking the analogy of human evolution to the finance profession, I think I can think of some professionals as primitive Homo accounticus, the kind who would be bean counters. The focus is on numbers. But the evolutionary path that's impacted by all the big changes is leading to evolution of new species. I call that Homo analyticus. Instead of bean counters, these are bean growers. Now, the table here illustrates this evolutionary word, the previous and the new. This change has always been on. And in fact, the events of the last year may well be that meteor strike that's accelerating the extinction of Homo accounticus. Moving on to the next slide, if we look at all of this in terms of a continuum, previously we had the accountants who were, I would see, lying on the left of this graphic. Then came management accountants who would be doing reporting and analysis. Then only in the past few years, we hear decision support, business partner, and that require that insight, influence, and impact, which is on the right of this graphic. So then what are the basics? I'll cover that in the next slide. Next slide, please. First is a deep knowledge of accounting and performance management. That's basic. A strong background in managerial accounting, core financial reporting. I mean, it's always useful to be able to compile historic performance data and identify relationship between revenue and cost, for example. But that's not enough. To be effective, the FP&A professional must have a strong grasp of every functional area of the organization, the internal and external drivers, the resources required to meet expectations, the risks, and the marketplace dynamics. Now, the knowledge coming from these two first areas needs to be put to use. Now, whether that's in terms of complex growth modeling, generating scenarios, or developing insight into drivers, that's the third box on this chart. Then we have the communication skills. Now, I've been in a lot of presentation where even some experienced FP&A professionals who've just given detailed presentation with loads of technical details to top management or board members. Now, at the end, I hear them mumbling, damn, they just don't get it. Now, I always ask them, well, I think what needs to be analyzed is it really them or is it you? Maybe you didn't communicate it that well. And lastly, what is needed is an insatiable desire to solve business puzzles, a powerful innate need to discover and eliminate the underlying drivers and obstacles. These are what I call the basics, the essentials for FP&A. Now, the evolution of XP&A brings further challenges and requirements. Next slide, please. And that evolution brings me to the hard part, what everyone else calls soft skills. Now, repeated skill surveys continue to show that there is dearth of people with the right set of soft skills. And this is the skill set that will underpin the success in XP&A domain. I believe that some of these soft skills cannot be taught, but they can definitely be learned. Now, I've illustrated just a few of these skills in the hexagons that you see here, and we'll see a few important ones in the next slide, please. First of all, dealing with uncertainty or ambiguity. To use a very cliched statement, change is the only certainty in the world today. We hear that a lot. It may be cliched, but it's actually true. We all know that change is not easy. Change creates ambiguity and uncertainty. That leads to complexity, and that makes decision-making difficult. I see a lot of new professional accountants who have a distinct bias towards structure, like things in order, things to be black and white. I used to be like that at the start of my career. But as you progress, you realize that you need to be comfortable with ambiguity and, in fact, learn to deal with it. A few months ago, I was discussing forecasting with some of the senior FP&A practitioners, and a theme I captured was need to do accurate forecast. Now, to my mind, accurate forecast is an oxymoron. And that is at the heart of this old traditional approach to FP&A. The assumption is that by applying a set of analytical tools, one can predict the future accurately and choose a clear strategic direction for it. This process often involves underestimating uncertainty. But when the future is truly uncertain, this approach could at best be marginally helpful and at worst, downright dangerous. Underestimating uncertainty can lead to decisions that neither defend the company against threats nor take advantage of the opportunities that high level of uncertainty provide. Another danger lies in another extreme. Now, if you can't find strategy that works under traditional analysis, one may abandon the analytical rigor and base the decisions on gut instincts. And that leads to the second part here, which is decision making, or more specifically, data-driven decision making. Now, there's a huge amount of data available, a lot of investment going into gathering, storing, accessing, analyzing all that data. But does all this data make better decisions? All this investment in analytics can actually be useless, even harmful, unless employees can incorporate that data into complex decision making. Remember, big data needs to be complemented by big judgment. Now, the chart to the right shows outcome of a study done to analyze the capability of employees with data-driven decision making. The three groups: the visceral decision makers who go exclusively with their gut or instinct. On the other end of the spectrum, there is unquestioning empiricists who trust analysis over judgment. And in the middle are informed skeptics, the employees best equipped to make good decisions, effectively balancing judgment and analysis. Now, being an informed skeptic is a no-brainer, right? But the study found that only 38% of employees and 50% of senior managers fall into this third group, which means that being informed skeptic is obvious, but it's definitely not prevalent. And that's a key attribute that needs to be developed and nurtured. And that brings me to the last, and I believe, a very important attribute for a successful FP&A professional today. That's into the next slide, please. That's influence without authority. Now, how can you influence those over whom you have no authority? Now, these days, with flatter and more matrixed organizations, outsourcing, virtual teams, one does need to get things done with peers inside and outside the organization. Now, in these circumstances, that command and control leadership, I am the leader, you the follower approach, that doesn't get one very far. What works is something called lateral leadership. Now, what I've done is I've listed some of these attributes of lateral leadership. I won't go into detail with the limited time, but very briefly, networking, you all know, and in fact do. This is key to influence without authority. Constructive persuasion and negotiation, not in terms for a tool for manipulation, but a key skill that when employed with mutual benefit in mind, can vastly enhance influence. Consultation, seeking advice, it works because when someone provides input, they become more committed, involved, and intrinsically motivated. Coalition building, collaboration, that's a fact of human nature that, when several people who collectively advocate an idea, they have more influence than one proponent. And that's why this plays a very vital role in lateral leadership. And lastly, the principle of reciprocity. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. We'll move on to the next slide. Now, FP&A success, remember, hinges on people, and XP&A much more so. I've covered a lot of what it would take to be successful as this evolution progresses. Most of the skills I've spoken about can be developed, and I think we as managers and leaders have the responsibility to do that. That brings me to the end of this whirlwind evolutionary tour, and I'd invite the other panelists for comments.
Thank you so much, Ash. I would like to invite all the panelists to switch on your cameras and your microphones. And Nili, what is your view after this presentation?
Great presentation. I strongly believe in the force of people in enabling moving forward. I think the point that Ash made about influencing without authority is probably one of the most critical to the success away from managing accounting to next generation FP&A. And he listed some very good points that I agree with. To me, it means three main things. One, you have to become fluent in the business language. Two, you have to bring value to the table time and again through meaningful and digestible insight. And finally, you have to be brave enough, or in other words, willing to challenge the status quo or long-standing business assumptions, so you can really affect good decision making. Because just sharing the data, as he was saying, it's not enough, and you must have the soft, or what we call core skills, in order to influence action.
Thank you, Neely. Great insights. David, what would be your subject matter on this?
Yeah, so I think you have the start of what could be a great leadership book. So I think there's one key thing in there for me, and that's that you can have the best methodologies and processes and technology in place, but people, they're the key to execution, right? So I think you really did a great job of just highlighting the importance of people and people skills.
Thank you, David. Great reminders. And Kevin, your view on this?
Yeah, I agree. Really interesting and so important, how, you know, developing our teams through their careers and sort of moving from that very black and white view and into the ambiguity and the grey areas. So I have two thoughts. One, in terms of the skill and in the sea of data that we have, I think FP&A sort of soft skills need to be thinking about what are the key questions that need to be answered. So that forecast accuracy, you can get very lost and go down so many rabbit holes when you've got so much data at your fingertips. So sort of really focusing what are the key questions and what needs to be answered to add the most value as an FP&A business partner. And secondly, in terms of the influencing, I think this is very much linked to organizational culture as well. So bigger organizations tend to be much more used to working in a matrix organization, so therefore be much less wedded to direct reporting lines, whereas smaller organizations or more traditional organizations tend to be very wedded to the more linear reporting lines. And so navigating and sort of changing cultures, using influence and having credibility on the recommendations, as Nili mentions, is really an evolution and a journey, both individually for a person as well as for an organization. But really interesting, and soft skills are everything as you develop your career, I think.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Ash, for this wonderful presentation. Let us hear from our participants now. So this is the time for the last and fourth polling question. I'm launching this right now, and it's all about what is the best method to develop soft skills. I'm launching the poll, and please can you share your view on this? Please choose one of those that is the best description for you, for your company, for your experience. What is the best method to develop FP&A soft skills? Is it mentorship? Is it training, courses, coaching, learning by experience? Please continue to vote. Almost half of you voted. Another, just a few seconds. Yes, more than 65% of you voted, and I'm closing the poll. And I'm sharing the results. Interesting. So the majority of you think that mentorship is one of the best methods. Definitely, this is the way to go. Training courses only 3%, coaching 27%, and learning by experience 33%. Ash, what would you say about this?
Well, I'm definitely not surprised with this. That nearly 70% of the people think that mentorship and learning by experience are the key to developing soft skills. As I mentioned in my presentation, that some of these soft skills, I believe they cannot be taught, but they can be learned. So the onus is on the learner rather than on, what you might call the teacher or the coach. And therefore, mentorship, i.e. guiding people, and them learning by experience, I think are the best way. I mean, I always believe that if you want to learn swimming, jump in the pool. The deeper end, the better.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ash. Thank you to all our participants for your votes, for sharing your experience with us. I'm hiding the results, and this is the time for key takeaways. But before we do this, I really would like to ask everyone, if you would like to ask questions, please send those questions through the question chat box. We already have a lot of them, but don't worry, even if we don't have enough time, we will accumulate those questions and share them between our panelists and then get back to you through email. Okay, so this is key takeaways from the session, 30 seconds key takeaways from all our panelists. Once again, I would like to invite all of you to switch on your cameras, to switch on your microphones, and let us start from key takeaways. 30 seconds key takeaways before we start Q&A session. Nili, what would be your key takeaway for people to remember?
30 seconds is tough, but I think to think about transition to next-gen FP&A, it's really a transformation of skill set and mindset, a transformation of the technology and the digital architecture, which kind of enables a lot of that work, and a transformation of processes and the engagement model between finance and business partners, to Corinne's excellent presentation. If you continue doing things the same way you've done them before, you're not going to get a new outcome. And that's more than just an incremental change. It's got to be a lot of more braver, more bold changes.
Thank you, Nili. David, your key takeaways?
Yeah, one, don't get caught up in all the acronyms. I don't know if one did a tally of all the acronyms we used today, but the bottom line is the technology is available. Okay, that's hopefully really clear. You know, and there's the text there to connect the plans and people for better outcomes. Look for opportunities to improve the planning process, right? So where can you improve the planning process? Start connecting those plans and align them to the common objectives and goals as a starting point.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Karen, what would be yours? Your key takeaways?
I think my key takeaway is that it's about, I suppose, drawing from different disciplines for FP&A to be successful. So, Larissa, you know, I suppose without us knowing, you've sort of approached different people and created, I think, a really rounded and, you know, broad perspective on FP&A. So my takeaway is actually, I think, you know, looking at the elements we've discussed today and not assuming that one or the other is the solution. It's a really good, strong combination of all that delivers the outcome of being a brilliant FP&A practitioner.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Karen. Ash, your key takeaways after your session?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take it back to the basic elements which I mentioned in my presentation of FP&A. You know, so we had Nili first making the case for the change and all that is happening. We had David talk about the technology side of things. We had Karen talk about the tools and techniques and how to implement that to get onto the next step. And I spoke about the people. So I think we've covered what I call the whole, you know, the 4 pillars of FP&A here.
Excellent. Absolutely. So it was a well-rounded session, practical experience, thought leadership, visions. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. And now this is the time for Q&A. So I would like to ask you to stay with your cameras on. We already have a lot of questions. More questions are coming. Don't worry if we don't have enough time. We will answer your questions even after this meeting. So the first question is to you, Nili. Do you have any good example of companies who have implemented extended planning and analysis, or how you call it, the new operating model for FP&A, Nili? Any great examples? I know that you're dealing with a lot of organizations around the globe. Something you would like to share?
Absolutely. I can't share names of clients, obviously, you know, before you all understand the reasons, but we have seen not huge number of clients already having achieved this vision, but a lot of them moving towards that vision. One of the clients we're working with is actually doing a lot of what Karen was saying, trying to integrate the SNOP and financial planning. And that FP&A team is working to align the planning events and create the technology and data platform so that everyone is working off the same page. So again, it's not like the success is not yet there. It's an aspirational thing. As Dave was saying, it's been going on for a while, but given that the technology is here, the processes are here, need to be changed, and the engagement model is clearer, we'll see more of that happening.
Thank you, Neely. Thank you for your answer. David, the next question is to you. Very interesting question. It's about the risk that artificial intelligence predictive analytics will reduce the people's engagement and business partnering without the business. I think it would be a great question, not only to David, but also to Kevin and Ash. It would be interesting to see your view, technology view, and also practitioner's view. So David, what would be your answer?
Sure. I don't see AI taking over the function, right? So AI is good for a number of things. One is to do repetitive tasks that don't have a lot of variability and repeatable, right? That's prime use case. I mean, that's what robotic process automation was really designed to do. What I do see is that AI, and AI is a very broad term, okay? So machine learning is one example that falls under there. I see machine learning helping and augmenting the process that FP&A is going to do, which is to really analyze the data, look at key insights, and help support better decision making. I mean, one of the things that we're doing in this realm as well is we're really looking how do we tie in predictive analytics more closely into the planning process. So take a forecast, populate a plan, repopulate the forecast. So we're using things like natural language query, for example, to make it easier for all these business people to self-serve and ask the questions that they need to drive their decisions without having to send all those requests back into FP&A or some IT function. So I don't see it taking over the need for people in an FP&A function. I do see it supporting, though, the FP&A and broader analytic function in the organization.
Thank you so much, David. And quick replies from Kevin and Ash in relation to your business partnering. Kevin, you are the first, please, if you can share your view whether those analytical tools will reduce engagement within FP&A business partnering model.
I don't think it'll reduce engagement. I think, as David says, self-service reporting will help, sort of maybe move FP&A time out of providing reports and helping people understand reports into more value-added business partnering. So I think it'll shift the percentage of time that business partners and FP&A practitioners spend doing and creating information, and move more into the space of advising and doing more of the value add and the stuff that's much more interesting and fun for people who are really genuinely interested in the business. So I think it complements it brilliantly, but I think it will be maybe a different person in the future, in the FP&A role, more, I suppose, with the softer skills that Ash has described, rather than the technical spreadsheet skills.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. And ask your quick commentary on this as well. What do you think?
Very quickly, I'm going to say what David and Karen have already said. AI, ML, they are enablers. They can help with the analysis, but remember, when I spoke about that continuum, insight, influence, that remains with the person. A machine can't do that. And that's why these technologies will always complement the person doing it. They'll help them do those things, but they will be tools rather than taking things over.
Thank you so much, Ash. Kevin, another question to you. Do you suggest that companies start to use strategy tools such as balanced scorecard to ensure department needs in order to keep with this implementation of XP&A? So what would be your suggestions?
Yes, definitely. I love a scorecard, and I love a red, amber, green, I'll be honest. And that's my supply finance background. So yes, I mean, I think there's a saying, what gets measured gets done. And performance metrics are really, really key. And being honest about your performance against those metrics is also very key. So yes, I think, not everyone likes them, especially when someone is in a meeting and they see there's a nice red against their KPI or their target. So it can be quite challenging for people to live through that, but it does mean that people focus and take action. So yes, I'm a big fan of scorecards.
Excellent. Thank you, Karen. And the next question is to you, Ash. So how do we manage organizational dynamics of other analytical hubs in organization that building up in function other than finance? So how can we manage these organizational dynamics, Ash?
See, very simply, FP&A needs to be embedded within the organization. You cannot have FP&A, sitting in one corner office out there churning analysis and reports. So when FP&A is really integrated into each and every function, you won't have this gap. I've had teams where my team members probably had a dual personality. One was as a finance person, the other one was the functional person of the function that they were supporting. I had a team member who used to support our operational and inventory management side of things. I think he almost spoke that native language rather than the language of finance. So to me, that's what is really important, is for the FP&A people to get embedded into the function that they are supporting and be seen as part of that function rather than part of finance who's coming from somewhere else and giving them, judgments and analysis.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ash. Great. And Karen, it looks like you would like to add something to this, yeah?
No, just agreeing.
Excellent. And the last question, there are more questions actually, but we are not able to answer all of them because of the time. But as I said, you can continue to send your questions to us. We will answer after the meeting. So this question is to everyone, and I would like your quick half-a-minute answer, if you can. So very interesting question. What does the early stage of extended planning and analysis look like to you? So how it looks and what would be the steps to implement extended FP&A to move to this more advanced stage? Neely, your 30 seconds, please.
I think to the comments we just heard, the early stage, beginning stage is a lot more finance focused, internally focused, and not looking at the entire enterprise. The next stage will require more of that business enablement, a new engagement with the entire company, serving as the analytics and planning hub for the rest of the organization. And that would take a combination of what we all spoke about, technology, process, and new skills.
Thank you so much, Neely. David, your 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think there's, look, no, you're all starting at some point, right? Unless you're a brand new business and you're just firing it up from day one. So the one starting point, look where there's the biggest impact, right? In some form of integrated financial planning, as Nili mentioned, is it to bring tighter headcount planning, get the sales and operation plan integrated with a financial plan, so you have that visibility. Another way you look at it is get your strategic plan in order, set that up, align your financial goals and targets to that, and then start bringing the operational plans into that. So there's a couple different ways that you could start, certainly more than just one.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Karen, your quick 30 seconds answer.
Yes, I think I'm going to take it from an individual's perspective. So I think if you're someone who's tended to stay within the financial space, maybe do a report and hand it over and then move on to the next task. I think the step one would be, show a lot more ownership and interest in what is that report going to be used for? How can I add value to that? And sort of go beyond, just stretch your influence or your sphere of influence just that little bit more each time you do a new task. And I think that, continuous journey, you'll find yourself in an extended FP&A space sooner than you realize.
Thank you, Karen. And Ash, you are the last to answer this question.
Well, I'm going to take a slightly different perspective. If we want to see where we are going, I think we need to see where we came from. When we had FP&A as a terminology being bandied about, the F used to be very large P probably a little bit smaller, and A smallest. Then the shift happened where F is now becoming smaller, P a little bit larger, and A much more larger. And with the extended planning and analysis, it's the X that becomes much more important, the extended part of it or the integrated part of it. And to me, the best way of doing it is not to think of FP&A as a finance function. FP&A is an organizational function, and it helps the organization deliver the strategy. Often a lot of companies have a finance organization and probably a strategy team sitting separately. To me, FP&A belongs there as an overall corporate function rather than just a finance function.
Absolutely agree with you. I think this is fantastic session. Great answers to questions. There are more, and let us answer after the meeting. So we will be back to our participants with our answers. I would like to say thank you so much to our fantastic international panel. It was well-rounded, interesting, very practical and dynamic session. But I would like, before we conclude this session, I would like to remind all our participants about upcoming events. So the next digital FP&A board, UK and Ireland, it would be on the 18th of March, and it would be about the art of science of digitized FP&A business partner. The registrations are open, so places are there if you would like to join. And also we have a number of interesting webinars. You will see all the links at this presentation, and also we will send this to you in our thank you letter. And finally, I would like to say thank you so much to our sponsor, our technology partner, SAP. Thank you for supporting us with this event, with this particular webinar. And of course, I would like to say thank you so much to everyone, to our global community. Let us stay connected. Let us move FP&A to the next level. So panelists, thank you so much. I would like to say that I hope we will restart our travel. In the second half of the year, we're already planning our meetings in London, in other European countries, but also in America from September. Let us be optimistic, and I hope to meet all of you face-to-face very, very soon. Please stay safe, please stay connected, and enjoy the rest of your day, evening, or night. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.